A thief is the opposite of a ninja. You can see a thief, but you can't see a ninja. Just one of the many uncited facts you learn when you take the initiative to analyze video games in the market. Thief is a modern reboot of the older Thief games from the 90s. This was made by Eidos Montreal, one of the handful of studios now owned by Square Enix. Originally announced in 2009, had a few controversial reports during its development, lots of things were changed. Now we have this thing. Let's take a look. You play as Garrett, the master thief, and you have an entire city filled with poor people exposed to a plague, while the rich people are isolated from it. Your main objectives usually revolves around sneaking into areas of high society and stealing stuff. It does tell you where exactly you're supposed to go with a marker on the screen, but you have to figure out how to get there yourself. There's usually not too much to figure out. The combat feels clunky, but that's actually a good thing here. You're supposed to avoid fighting, and your inventory items and combat options are very limited. Stealth is, of course, the whole point of the game. You steal stuff and escape without being noticed. This requires a vast amount of swift and silent movements, but I feel this is where the game drops the ball. You're restricted in the ways you can move around. All of it is context sensitive, so it's ultimately the level designers who dictate what you can or cannot do in the game. You can't even jump, so forget about sprint jumping across a pressure plate that activates a trap. You have to find the switch that deactivates it, and it's things like this that make the game feel linear, even though there's supposed to be numerous ways to get through an area. No jumping, no alternate paths to the destination, no using rope arrows anywhere. Speaking of which, let's talk about the rope arrows. Unlike in the older games where you can use one on any plank of wood you want, here you can only use them in specific places designated in the level design. There are some sound problems with the game, mainly positional. There are times when you can hear a conversation or a sound effect. It sounds like it's right in front of you when it's not, and this kind of freaks me out at times because now I'm imagining things are where they're not supposed to be. This is obviously a bug. You have an upgrade system which is standard fare at this point. I have nothing against it in itself, but if you're supposed to be a master thief, shouldn't you already have these skills? Seems weird to me. One thing I do like is the custom difficulty mode. You can change the rules of the game and disable some abilities in exchange for points at the end. So if you want to do a playthrough without any kills or takedowns, you can force this rule, and if you break it, it's game over. I'd say this is the one thing that makes the game stand out, but of course, that doesn't excuse the rest of the game. It's apparent from the messy development over the past couple of years that everyone on the team had different ideas on what the game should be, and it really shows with the bugs, the shallow mechanics, and the not-so-stealthy action sequences. After playing through 4 chapters, I think I spent too much time playing this already, but fortunately, the analysis will be short. The first few weeks, well, I don't think people will be paying attention to this, to be honest. The original Thief games were PC games that appealed to a niche. You introduce this reboot to the mainstream audience on consoles, it doesn't have that brand recognition. For many of these people, this might as well just be a ripoff of Dishonored. I expect people to get their Let's Plays out the door and then quickly move on. All this will do is push the YouTube videos of the older Thief games off the first page of search results. So this game will just obscure the existence of the older games and damage their reputation. As for the bugs, I have a hunch that they won't be fixed. Any problems with positional audio is one of the easier things that can be noticed and fixed through playtesting. They didn't fix it before release, or even with a day 1 patch, and if they can't be bothered to fix something as trivial as that, they're not fixing anything. A few months from now, this game will be dead. Actually, I think this entire series is dead. Based on Square Enix's current track record, I'd say they'll consider this game a failure. It doesn't have the hype or the interest that the Tomb Raider reboot had, so it's not going to sell as many copies either. The game already has DLC right out the gate, and I'm sure they'll be releasing more simply because, well, people will buy it. People always buy it. Honestly, I don't expect too much to happen to this game. I just don't see it. This franchise has no future anymore. Maybe a year from now, they'll release a definitive edition. Just kidding. Maybe. Probably. I think this reboot had the potential to be better than the original Thief games. The technological limitations of the 90s are gone, and they used the lighting to its full extent in the gameplay, but there's a lot of silly things that are holding it back. Things that shouldn't have been here in the first place. This is the big problem with modern reboots, or modern games rather. We're overcoming barriers with advances in hardware and processing power. We can make these game worlds bigger, we can improve the gameplay and increase the content of a game. Instead, everyone is fixated on creating the next interactive movie. Situational awareness and freedom of movement are replaced with context-sensitive actions and arrows pointing to off-screen stuff. Gameplay is being limited so that a story can be told. And for what? So I can look at it like a piece of art? This is not a centerpiece in your living room, this is software. You don't need to play the older Thief games to see the problems with this new one, but I highly recommend that you do because they're good stealth games. As for this reboot, it's $50. Terrible price for a terrible game. In a few months, we'll follow up on this game, not that it needs it, but we'll do it anyway. Thanks for watching.